Well guys, we've got a good one for you today. This is the new BMW M5 Competition. Refreshed for the 2021 model year, it has 617 horsepower and an 8-speed ZF automatic transmission. It's 4-wheel drive, it's also 2-wheel drive. This is a fantastic sports sedan. Finally, I think the M5 is back in full stride. We'll give you guys some first impressions on what it's been like to drive this new M5 Competition this week. This is a $141,000 M5, though it only starts at around $104 grand. With the competition package, that adds $7,600. So, you can get up there in price. Of course, everything is an option. This one's fully loaded. We'll put all the detailed options, specifications, packages in the description. We have carbon ceramic brakes. We have all the good bells and whistles. Most notably, we have this custom $5,000 color Voodoo Blue, which this is normally a pretty subtle looking car, but Voodoo Blue attracts a little bit more attention, and I like it. It looks good. This has always been the kind of ultimate sports sedan. It started it all back with the E28, and we're in a pretty good place these days. We've got a good amount of trunk space back here, a really long area. Maybe not as wide as I would like, but you've got to leave some room for those tires. You can have a little bit of a pass-through through the middle, and you can fold the seats down, which is nice. Carry some larger items in the back. Look at these new 3D taillights. They're super bright, especially under braking. I think they look pretty sharp. You've got a rear diffuser, blacked out exhaust tips. This is a really gorgeous sedan. I love that they haven't messed around with the grille, done anything too weird. Look at this, BMW. You can make a nice big grille and still have it proportional to the rest of the car. Such a good looking M5. I think this is probably one of the best M5s I've driven in a long time. I was a little bit disappointed with the F10 generation, and this really delivers. Let's have a look under the hood. This is the 4.4 liter V8, 617 horsepower, but I'm sure that's pretty underrated from the factory. Usually BMW engines make that at the wheels, if not better. We've got these same mirrors that we had on the M4. They almost look like they're connected to the top. In the back seat, I'm 5'10". This driver's seat is set to my driving position, and I have a lot of space back here. I think if you were over 6 foot, you'd be very comfortable in the back. This is a 5 Series after all, as it should be. We've got manual window shades, rear climate control, heated rear seats, a couple of USB-C ports, little cigarette lighter plug, and a beautiful view of this front cockpit. These seats are very comfortable, very adjustable. In the back seat, we've got a couple of cup holders that fold out cleverly like that. And of course, since this is a carbon roof, no sunroof. BMW's been adding carbon roofs to a lot of their M cars lately. Standard, and yeah, that's cool. We have massive 285/35 R20 tires here, Pirelli P0s, wrapped on 20-inch wheels. You can see the carbon ceramic brakes. Love the contrast of the gold calipers with this Voodoo Blue. And on the side here, you can see it says M5 Competition. I'll hop on the front seat and show you guys what that looks like. This is such a familiar place. I think BMW has really kind of perfected the ergonomics of their interiors, and this is very similar to the rest of the BMW lineup. It is just a 5 Series, but we've got some fun M stuff in here too. We've got this orangish reddish surround around the shifter, which is very cool. That's new for 21. And of course, you've got your matching orangish reddish M buttons, which I have programmed to a couple different settings. We can show you guys what those settings are. So if we go into setup, you can see that I've set M1, engine to Sport Plus. You get some pops and crackles and bangs from the exhaust. It sounds muted from the inside, but from the outside, you're gonna be bursting people's eardrums. It's pretty loud. Let's do that one more time. Yeah, Chassis is set to sport. You get a little bit of a nice mid-ground there between comfort, which can be a little bit soft, and sport plus, which could be a little bit too stiff for some street driving. Steering's in sport, though I'm probably going to change that to comfort, and X drive is set to four-wheel drive sport, which is a more rear-biased four-wheel drive system. You can save your M modes if you want to change them around just by holding the button. If you turn traction completely off, you can go in and engage two-wheel drive if you want. That's just, this thing turns into a drift missile in two-wheel drive. We did a previous video on this exact same M5 where we took it out to skid pad, tested it around in two-wheel drive, and it's very slidey, and it shredded the tires in a few minutes. That was kind of my bad. I didn't really warm up the tires beforehand. A note, in the future, if you're going to be doing drifts on a skid pad in an M5 or pretty much anything with these Pirelli P0s, warm them up first so that the internal temperatures and the external temperatures don't cause the tires to delaminate. We also have a couple different gauge cluster options. There is this M display, so you can engage that whenever you want, and then when you press track and you hold it and you activate it, the infotainment will turn off. It'll show you all of your relevant information here in the fully digital gauge cluster, and all of your intelligent safety systems, they're all deactivated. It's ready for racetrack duty, which I think is kind of cool. Just a press of a button, you can engage a great track mode. BMW has figured out what needs to be eliminated. Let's go back into the road M mode gauge cluster, which I actually kind of prefer. It's interesting, we just had the Audi RS6 Avant a couple weeks ago, and Audi's Sport gauge cluster and BMW Sport gauge cluster are very similar. It'll be fun to compare this M5 to the RS6. I haven't driven an E63S, however, a lot of AMGs drive very similarly, and I think this BMW M5 kind of sits somewhere nicely in the middle. The Audi RS6 was a bit soft, not as hardcore. It was very sharp, but of course the AMGs are really knife edge machines that have a lot of capability, but they're a little bit more raw and a little bit more engaging. And I think this M5 kind of splits the difference between those two spectrums of the Audi RS and the AMG stuff. So let's take this thing for a drive, see where we stand on the road. We're going to put our gauge cluster back in street, and let's go have a little bit of fun in this thing. We've got M stitching on the seat belts, a heated steering wheel here in the middle. We've got some digital climate controls down here, wireless phone charger, a couple of small cup holders, you know, all the things you would expect. Oh, and an exhaust button to make that louder or quieter if you so desire. I think we're just going to start off in M2 mode. I've got a nice low driving position. However, the steering wheel doesn't quite lower as much as I would like it to. This is kind of the extent of how far down it goes. And if I'm pretty far low in my seat, I feel like the steering wheel is still a little bit high. That said, not a bad driving position, just a minor complaint. There is so much power here, you guys. You really have to... This is an exercise in self-control. Performance is absolutely effortless. The steering weights up beautifully and actually gets quite a bit more feel than it does normally under hard cornering. This thing kind of wakes up when you start driving it fast and driving it hard. I like that. I would like a little bit more feel from the steering rack, a little more precision around town for normal driving. This M5 isn't oozing with driver feedback. It's a little bit of a dulled, numbed experience. However, last year we tested the new BMW M8 Coupe, and that was a $175,000 car. That was just a ridiculously spec'd and expensive M8. And I will say this M5 is a lot more fun and exciting to drive. The M8 was a little bit of a disappointment. It was kind of dull, and this makes up for that. And I think this is probably the one to get if you're going to get a fast, big, heavy M car. The four-wheel drive system here is incredibly capable. The performance is almost unbelievable sometimes. Definitely something that you want to explore on track. This is one of those cars that if you're just enjoying this on the street, you're never going to get even close to appreciating what it can do and how it reacts and handles. Sounds good too, I think. The CF8 speed is very good in how it responds. It's tuned beautifully. You can use the paddle shifters with joy and they'll respond according to your inputs. And then you just press an M button and you're back into a full comfort mode and everything is right with the world. This is a very nice cruiser. This is a very nice long distance car. You get pretty good highway range. Around 450 miles you could probably eke out of this tank, maybe even a little bit more. You'll probably average around the low 20s, high teens, depending on how you're driving and what you're doing. At speed on the highway, incredibly comfortable. You get radar guided cruise control, the speed limiter, lane keep assist, all the cruise control settings that you may not find in the M4. This does a beautiful job of blending comfort, luxury, and performance. Like all M cars, there is so much adjustability here. There have to be millions of different configurations for drive modes and transmission settings and gauge cluster display settings. It's all a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but I guess some people like that. They like to have their customized experience. And it is nice that you can change all this stuff on the fly with these M1 and M2 buttons. I do appreciate that. It's just so freaking fast. Let's do a quick brake test with these carbon ceramics and then I will launch. Whoa, yes. Under 3 seconds to 60 miles per hour. That wasn't even engaging launch control. I'm not really going to bother with all the settings and things that it takes to do that. You can just brake, torque, and go, and it'll kind of mush your brain into the back of your skull. You get all the sensations of any supercar in this M5, which is just incredible. I love the pops from this exhaust. They're a little bit inconsistent. Shocking performance from this M5. Really, I mean, I don't know. We had the 720S a few weeks ago, and the performance in this, it's not anything close, but it reminds me of that level of speed where you really have to recalibrate your brain to what's coming up ahead of you. The road just accelerates faster than in most other cars you have ever experienced. The power, the way it puts it all down, the way it hides its speed. I mean, if it weren't for the speedometer right in front of you in the head-up display, you wouldn't know that you're doing crazy speeds in this thing. You'd feel like, yeah, we're just cruising along at a comfortable rate. This is truly an Autobahn burner, and yeah, you get in some trouble in this thing, that's for sure. You have to be careful. Again, an exercise in self-control. While we're just cruising on the highway, let's test out some of these lane keep assist, cruise control settings. Ooh, is that a new Raptor? We You turn on the system by pressing the center button here, and then you can choose between a couple different modes: distance control and assisted driving. Assisted driving will keep you centered in your lane. I think it will also change lanes for you. We'll test that out here in a minute. But you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel. It has kind of hand sensors in there, and it doesn't last very long with your hands off the wheel, so you've got to stay engaged. This seems like a pretty good system. We're staying very well centered in the lane. We're not kind of being drunk and moving back and forth between the lines. It's easy to control, easy to change 5-mile-an-hour increments. This is kind of a double press toggle switch. So glad that we still have physical controls and buttons in this M5. When everyone else is moving into haptic feedback and these silly touch buttons, BMW gives you real controls, real buttons. This is one of my favorite steering wheels now, just because of that. You also have a speed limiter, which is very useful because you can accelerate as fast as you want up to a certain speed, and then it'll stop accelerating, which I think is a good kind of self-control device in this M5. Jaguar has had something very similar back in the day, and I believe Land Rover has something similar to that too. The power from this 4.4 liter V8 builds so progressively. There's just a wave of torque, and then that wave just keeps building and building and building, and you ride it out, and every single gear feels like warp speed. These carbon ceramic brakes are very responsive. They have a lot of bite. You can definitely slam some passengers' heads forward without really paying attention too much. Sometimes you have to kind of, you have to be a little bit careful with your brake inputs. Pretty typical with carbon ceramics. And there's 60. It doesn't take much. Ridiculous cornering performance. Just effortless. I love it. You get a good amount of feel through the chassis. You can hear the tires squealing away. And there's a real M car. Oh, that's beautiful. Seats do keep you very well bolstered under hard cornering. And yeah, every time I come into a braking zone, I thank BMW for these carbon ceramics. Pops and bangs tune on your M5. I think it's really only about under 40-50 miles per hour that it happens, but yeah, definitely adds a bit of an excitement factor. We'll go under this bridge here, and the pops and bangs get super loud. There we go. That was a loud one. I will say one thing. I think this ZF 8-speed suits the M5 a little bit better than in the M4. I really preferred the DCT in the previous generation M4 to the ZF 8-speed in the new M4. But this really suits this car. It's a little bit slower. It's a little bit, not lazier, but it kind of smooths out the power in this car. And with such ferocious torque and ferocious horsepower, you kind of want that a little bit. And this is, you know, this is a comfortable, big brute of a sedan. And having a dual clutch in here might make it a little bit too sharp, a little bit too rough. This this is a fun car to drive fast. And BMW is, I think they're back with the M5 with this latest refresh. Between this and the CS, you can kind of pick your flavor. It's, like I said at the beginning of the video, it's a nice middle child between the AMG fire-breathing, loud snorting option that's maybe a little bit stiffer and not as luxurious, and the Audi, which is maybe a little bit too muted and too subdued. This is also considerably lighter. This is only around 4,400 pounds, which is not light, but the Audi was 5,000 pounds. So, something to be said about that. They've really got this car well dialed in. I think if you want a little bit more driving engagement, a little bit more character, the M5 CS is probably going to be the car for you. Some of the noises this thing makes too. This has been a really fun car to drive this week. Very impressive car. Every time you get in it, you're shocked at the performance that it can deliver and put down. On the street, it's a fun car to drive. It's very comfortable. It's very luxurious. There's a great amount of tech here. BMW's done a pretty good job implementing it and making it usable as iDrive can be. There's a lot going on. There's so many settings. There's so many driver controls. You can really customize this car to your preferences, or you can just spend your entire ownership trying to get it right and fiddling around with all the settings. So, those are my thoughts on the new M5. Wicked fast, wicked comfortable, hides its speed beautifully, but could maybe use just a little bit more feedback and driver tactility, but we'll see what the CS is like. I think that'll probably deliver where this maybe falls a little bit short. Let's walk you around this new M5 one more time, and then we'll go in and do a Bowers & Wilkins sound system test. That's a nice little optional extra on this M5, and we'll see what that's like. I do like the way this shifter operates. Even though it's an electronic shifter, it kind of feels like you've done something when you put it into reverse or put it into gear. 360 cam, not the highest resolution setup in the world, but it gets the job done. You can see what you need to. I think in a less overstated color than Voodoo Blue, this would be a pretty subtle looking sedan. People wouldn't really know what it is, and I like that. It didn't have the M5 badge on it and the 4 exhaust tips. See this thing fly by, and just another BMW. Love the design on this. I hope they don't ruin the M5 design someday with another update. This is such a good looking car, and yeah, I've really been scratching my head on BMW designs lately. Of course, you have your gesture controls. Very gimmicky, but I'd rather just use the volume controls on the steering wheel. Horsepowers in Wilkins is okay. I'm not getting blown away by the sound system in a $140,000 car, but that's kind of typical. None of BMW's higher end sound systems have really been super impressive. They're good, but they're not maybe as excellent as some of the competition. Alright, that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Stay tuned on Windy Road Magazine channel and Daily Motor. We've got some more videos on this M5 that have already been posted. Kind of late to the game on this one, but that was my own doing with the whole tire shredding situations. Lesson learned. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.